So I think we're going to go ahead and start today. Our webinar today is on password management, and we have Ian MacRae, who is the president and founder of Ian Computers, and we also have Thomas Kinsinger, who is our director of technology. And Thomas is going to lead the way and share with us about password management. Have time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So if you want to hold some questions till the end, and we will also be providing follow-up links with some more information and videos as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Ian. If Ian, you wanted to say one or two things before Thomas presents.
Well, I've really enjoyed working with Thomas to get technology running smoother for us at Ian Computers and our clients. And one of the things that really is a pain in everybody's tuchus these days is password management. If you're anything like me, you've got hundreds of passwords, and you have to create complex ones for all of these sites. So Thomas has really been focused on having some solutions for our customers and for us internally to keep all of those things secure. So Thomas, I'll let you roll with it and show us what you've got developed.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for that introduction, Ian, and thank you everyone for taking a few minutes of your day to join us for this webinar. We're excited about this, and our hope is that it'll be something that maybe just kind of gets you thinking, and hopefully will be beneficial to you and in your organization or your business in the coming weeks and the coming months. Just before we get too carried away here, everybody hear me okay? Anybody that's not hearing me?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect.
Yeah, good.
All right, sounds good. So when we talk about password management, and as I was kind of thinking about that and preparing for this today, I wanted us to really, think about security a little bit. And so, NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, they developed a framework a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2017, I want to say, when they started kind of rolling this framework out to folks. But this is just a framework as you think about security, and maybe it's passwords today, but it could be security in any genre. So we could be talking about security cameras or your server and your network, and we use this framework to kind of think through what we need to be doing, for security. So the framework is made up of 5 parts. So we have identify, and then protect, and detect, and respond, and recover. And so we're just going to kind of take this idea of passwords and use this framework to kind of flesh out, what we need to be thinking about and doing as it relates to passwords in our organizations. And so we're going to go through these kind of one by one. So identify, and when we talk about identify, we're looking at the asset and we're looking at the risk. So what is the asset that we're trying to protect or that we're concerned about? Well, in this case, it's passwords. But as you start to think about that, that asset, your passwords, that covers a lot more than what you might think. Maybe it's, in your marketing department, it may be your CRM tool where you have a password to log into that. It could be your Twitter account or your Facebook account that you use for marketing. It could be your email. It could be your HR info and how you have that secured with passwords, or maybe your company's trade secrets, your secret sauce or recipes, whatever that may be. Those are the assets that we're concerned about protecting. And then when we're thinking about passwords, what are the risks? Well, largely our risks are going to be around our employees, right? So, do your employees use a strong password? Do your employees use the same password for everything? Do your employees change those on a regular basis and then just jot those down on a stick-it note and post them up in their cubicle where everybody can see it, or put it under their mouse pad where everybody thinks to look? Are they using things like tools like two-factor authentication? And so as you can see, as you walk through this framework and you look at this, it can become kind of revealing, and you may start to ask yourself the question, I haven't really thought about that, or I really don't know that. The next piece then is, how do we protect those assets, and how do we mitigate these risks that we have around our passwords? And, an obvious one is a written policy. And so hopefully, everybody that we work with or that's on here today, hopefully you have some sort of an employee handbook or a documentation that says, here's how we're going to use passwords. And if you don't have that, we have some examples of that. I'm happy to share some templates with folks about how they might, develop a policy like that. But then the other way that we can protect assets is with like a password tool. So, a couple that come to mind are things like, two-factor authentication, the MFA type solutions, where when you log into your secure system, you put in your password, and then you also put in a secondary code, maybe through, the code is maybe generated through a text message or an email, or maybe some sort of an app that runs on your phone like Google Authenticator. So that would be a password tool that we can use to be more secure. Everybody that we work with, for the most part, they use, Active Directory, or there's a server in place where we're able to automate that, password process. So, can we automate, the requirement to have 12-character, passwords when we log onto our PC? Or, other things that we can do with automation are, your computer, after it sits idle for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, it goes into some sort of a sleep mode or something, so that it forces people to put their password in when they log back in. And then a big one is a password manager. We want to talk about that, take a deeper dive and look at that in a little bit. So that would be another tool that we could use to protect those assets. And then what about detection of those threats? What are, we said our threats are largely our employees. What's our response when we see a disgruntled employee or somebody that's upset? You do a Google search and you'll find just hundreds of stories where a disgruntled employee, literally destroys a business. I was reading an article this week of a college that had an IT guy that went rogue, and when he was terminated, he withheld the password for their Gmail suite and held all of their users hostage with email, essentially not giving that up, and was requiring, essentially a ransom of, $200,000 if the school wanted the management password back. The school contacted Google and asked for it, and Google said, well, it's against our privacy policies to give you that password. We can't help you out there. So what do you do when you have that disgruntled employee, and are you prepared for that day when you have to address that issue? Another way that we can detect threats is really knowing and understanding what everybody has access to. So if you have a marketing team, does your marketing team, do you know everybody on your marketing team that has access to Facebook or Twitter? Or in your sales department, do you know everybody that has access to the CRM tool? Those are the kinds of things that we need to document and really have a understanding of. And that really leads into this next piece. What is our response to threats or breaches? And I think, probably the biggest thing that we can do as organizations is have a clear, documented change management process. So knowing who has access to what and what you need to lock down and what you need to change in the event that somebody is either terminated or they move on to a new place of employment. And being able to clearly manage that and navigate that during those times is going to be key to preventing breaches or threats in your organization. And then I guess lastly, how do you recover from an incident? So sometimes it does go bad. And do you know what happens next after you change that password and you do finally have that person locked out? and they no longer have access, who do you contact? Do you talk to the police? Do you talk to a vendor? Do you contact an attorney? And does your team know what that process looks like and what that structure looks like? So what you see when you take this framework, you can kind of walk through what your risks are, what the assets are that you're trying to protect, and then hopefully come up with some planning around what would happen in the event of a security issue. And you could do the same thing, with for instance, your security cameras. You'd ask the question, what are the assets we're trying to protect with these security cameras? And then in the end, what do you do, when something is compromised? What is that process for recovery? And so this framework that NIST has provided us, we can just use that for any aspect of security that we are looking at. All right, so what we want to do next is really introduce you to a tool called MyGlue. And for those of you that have been working with us for a while, you are familiar probably from our technicians or engineers interacting with you, and they may drop the term, IT glue. And so IT glue is a system that we use internally to document IT and passwords for our internal team. And what MyGlue is it's simply a kind of a second piece to that, but it's really designed for you, the end user, and it's designed to help you kind of manage your passwords, but not only your passwords, it would also be to manage IT information that you may want to share with other members in your organization. So we're just going to kind of do a demo, kind of a quick walkthrough of what this looks like. And along the way, I'll try to call out, areas where this is improving security and hopefully making things better for you as an organization.
Thomas, I have a question.
Sure.
About how long have we been implementing this process?
This process, I think we started 2 years ago, Ian. I want to say that's when we started kind of rolling this out. We've been using, the IT portion of it for, I guess, going back to 2015, so 5 years. This part has been around for about 2.5 years, I believe, that we've been using that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and log in just to a demo account that I've set up. And one of the first things you'll see when I log in, that terminology that you're seeing in a lot more things that you're logging into these days, the MFA code or the multi-factor, two-factor authentication code. I have this set up to integrate with Google Authenticator. And so with Google Authenticator, I have an app on my phone, and it's generating a new code about every minute. And so you have to put that code in fairly quickly because it'll go away if you don't. But you do have to have that code before you can log in. When I log in, you have a little dashboard here. And depending how things are set up, you have more or less that you're seeing. But I guess the password piece is what we want to kind of look at first. So I have a little lab that I have set up, and these are things that are just kind of associated with my lab. So I have some passwords. I created a little fake account here for Netflix a few minutes ago. And, one of the things that we were talking about early on is, passwords, when our users, when our teams are setting up passwords, it's really easy to get into bad habits. And bad habits being, using that same password for everything, or using a short password that's easy to remember. And what we really want to train our teams to do is to use passwords, like this. It's not something that you're going to remember, and it's probably not something you really want to write down. And the idea behind this is to really help us use a tool like this for our passwords. So you look at this and you say, well, I don't want to have to log in here every time I want to go somewhere on the web. And so let's say I click on Netflix here. I don't actually have a Netflix account, but if I did, if I went in here to the sign in option and and I bring this up and I click on passwords, all my passwords are right here. Now this is fake. This isn't for real, so it's actually not going to work. But if it was for real, it would have put all that information right in there. And actually it is. So there it is. So that long password we just looked at, that's showing up there. And then I just hit sign in. So what it does, it allows me to put a password in easily without having to remember, those really long passwords. So that's the simplicity of it. That's, that's one of the things that we're looking for is something that's easy to use. You guys still seeing my screen? I think I just cut it off there.
Yeah, you stopped sharing it.
Sorry about that.
My guess is, how did you come up with that long password? Because that's not an easy one. Did you just run your finger on the keyboard?
Yes, very good question. So let's say I'm creating a new password here. I'm just going to click generate, and it's going to generate me a password. And if I don't like that one, I click generate again, and I get a different one. So it's really easy to do. So this would be, whatever the account is, Wasabi's a backup solution that's available. So maybe I create a password for a Wasabi account, and then I can put it, in a different category. So it's a cloud solution, and I'm going to give it, a name. So, we'll call it demo, at demo.com, right? So I have the password. I can put the URL in here, whatever that is. So, another thing that often happens when we're creating new accounts is that it asks us, to fill out those security questions. So those security questions are often things like, where did you go on your honeymoon, or who was your mother's maiden name? Those kind of questions are pretty common. Best practice is not to actually give the correct answers for those things. So if you give the correct answers for those things, if I'm, the bad guy, I'm the hacker, I can go do some social media searches, and I can probably figure out some information about you. I might be able to figure out where you went on your honeymoon. I might be able to figure out, what your mother's maiden name was. Those kinds of things, you can track those things down. But in here, you could say, security question 1. And you can give an incorrect answer here, but you'll have the information documented, and it's securely documented, and so you don't necessarily have to put something out that would, potentially compromise you. So again, fairly simple to use, fairly simple to put together. The other part of this, go ahead.
Thomas, got a question. When you log into MyGlue, you have to have a password and a login to get into MyGlue, correct?
Yep, correct. So you're gonna have one password
to remember
that's easy for you to remember.
Yeah. So you don't want to make that one too easy either.
Correct.
Right.
But I can remember one complicated password. I probably can't remember 50.
All right. Well, maybe you can if you're young like you.
All right, Danny.
I got another question for you, but
sure.
A lot of these sites, when you do this, and I've been using the LastPass application.
Yep.
And sometimes the login and the password are on 2 different screens.
Yep.
So in LastPass, that complicates the issue, and it won't automatically populate.
Correct. So, and you'll have the same thing here.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, yeah. So a lot of those, a lot of these solutions, have those similar problems.
Okay.
Some of it's getting better, but yeah, there are similar problems there.
Okay.
I think where this is maybe a little different than LastPass. So LastPass is a great product, and I know lots of people that use it. We have customers that use it. Obviously, Danny, you use it. How does LastPass work if you have a password you want to share with another team member?
I don't know. I don't ever share them.
Okay. So let's say you have some passwords that are yours, but you also want other team members to have access to it. So maybe that's let's say you want your accounting department to have access to certain things, or you want your marketing department to have access to certain things. I mean, you want the whole team to have access to it.
Right.
So in the security tab here, I can create groups, and I can say that I want, you know, everybody in the marketing department to have this password, and I just check that box, and the next time they log in, they'll have access to that password. So the advantage of this is, and this is really where it comes down to the change management process. So there's some passwords that I'm okay with sharing with someone else, but I want to know that they have access to it if they're no longer part of my team. So with this, I can easily go in here and see exactly who has access to what password. So, you know, maybe we have a disgruntled employee in marketing, and they're let go, and I want to go in and see exactly what passwords they had access to. Then I know that I can come back here, and maybe I need to change those passwords depending on what the scenario is. Whatever I do, the first thing I want to do is I want to disable their account in my glue so they no longer can get back into that. If they've been using, you know, really big long passwords like this, they probably don't remember those, but maybe they wrote those down right before they were terminated, and so maybe I need to go in here and actually change these passwords. And I know what to change because I know what they had access to. Does that make sense from a change management perspective? Everybody understand that?
Yes, sir.
Thomas, I noticed when you were doing the demonstration there with Netflix that it auto-populated in that password field with just stars.
Correct.
It doesn't show the password to the employee by default.
Correct.
But you were playing around with it, and it looked like you could copy and paste, or you could sort of jerry with it and get that information out.
Yep.
So, you know, still the best practice, even though it's not, the tool isn't by default showing the employee the password, there's still some chance that they might have seen it. So.
Right, and they can log into the account here, and then they can go show password. So they can certainly get to the password if they need to.
I see. Thomas, when you started this demo out, you had to do the two-factor authentication, and I know that you know, we're seeing that more and more to say safe and secure, but it also takes a lot of time to fumble around with your phone, get the extra, you know, code from the Google Authenticator. So how often do I have to type in that code when I'm using this tool?
So if you've already logged in and you're using this icon up here to log into your sites, you won't have to do that, you know, every time you log into that. When you log in here, typically when you get onto the PC or when you go to your browser for the first time, you'll need to do that. If I exited out of the browser here, and then I came back in, I'd have to log in again, and I would have to put that code in at that time. But as long as I have Google open here and I'm working on things, I'm not going to need to do that. But you're right, it is time consuming.
Yeah, so in other words, if I'm working throughout the day and every time my computer goes to sleep, I don't have to put in the two-factor authentication to then, you know, go to my banking site and use this tool to fill out the passwords.
Correct.
So it's going to stay with me all day long.
Yeah, as long as Google's open. Again, though, like if you reboot your PC or you shut your PC down and then get back on, then you're going to have to put it back in. But yes, that would be correct. And I believe there are some timeout features that you can set. So you may want a timeout feature. So, you know, if it's inactive for, you know, an hour or two, maybe you're not in, you know, an Explorer, Google, in a browser. Yeah, but if you close the browser out, open the browser back up, you will need to put it back in. Okay, any other questions while we're there? So passwords are a big thing. Another piece is, you know, maybe you have documents, policies that you want to share with your teams. And so there's a documents tab that you can put here. In that documents tab, you know, maybe we have the password policy that we were talking about. So this is a password policy template, and it provides some guidance, you know, for how your employees maybe should create passwords or use passwords, how they should protect passwords. That's typically what we want to see in a good policy. So we'll share this with everybody after the call today. We'll email that out to you so you'll have that. But with this, you can share this out with your team, and they could just come here and look at this particular document. Other IT related things that you might want to put in here are maybe like your wireless access. So, if you want to be able to share a paraphrase, for people to access Wi-Fi, we can set that up in here where you can see the password for that particular SSID. So this is something where you could, keep everybody on the same page. The nice thing about this is, if you want to have some sort of a policy in place where you're updating your passwords on a regular basis, you might want to change your password every 30 days or 90 days or 120 days, or some people want to change it, every 6 months for the wireless network. This is an easy way to let that happen. And then, when somebody's not able to log in, they can just come right in here and take a look at the wireless and see what's been updated and where things are at. Maybe you have a remote access solution, and maybe I want to share a document, for how people can configure their VPNs for, maybe it's an Android or an iPhone or a Chrome OS or just a PC, whatever it may be. You can share these types of documents with your team, just to keep everybody kind of on the same page with where things are at. So this is kind of the tool in a nutshell. There's more that you can do, but kind of at a simple level, these are the things that we feel like people would benefit from having in place. And hopefully this is helpful and at least kind of gets you thinking about what you could do. And we'll open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stick around here for a little while and chat about anything that might be on your mind.
Thank you, Thomas. I have a quick question.
Sure.
And that would most likely be cost associated with this tool or implementing it.
So for our existing customers, this is part of the support offering that we provide. There is a small cost for just setting it up and getting it in place and providing some training to users. But outside of that, if you're an existing customer today, there is no additional fee associated with this.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thomas, is password management, I mean, we've all been dealing with lots of passwords for a long time, but is it something that is, a bigger issue today than it used to be? I was just thinking this morning when we were meeting with the with a local manufacturing company, and they had some IT transition, and they had, licenses and other assets in the cloud, and they no longer had that IT person there. It's not like those things are in the closet. So is that a bigger deal now that things have sort of all gone virtual on us?
That's a good question. I think it may have been a big deal for a while. And, obviously even password managers, Danny mentioned, LastPass, that's been around for a while. That's not a new thing, I wouldn't say. Yeah, so I think it's a big deal. I think from an organizational perspective or from a security perspective, we know that our users are often our biggest risk. And we know that, if you can get access to one password in a lot of organizations, you can probably get access to multiple passwords because a lot of people use the same passwords. So this is something that's, obviously a concern for a while. So it's an ongoing. Go ahead.
I was thinking about some of the sites that we've become responsible for when there's employee turnover, and in the old days, you'd walk in and all the servers were in the closet, and if you didn't have the password, maybe you had to reboot it and sort of crack the lock. But with everything now in the cloud, you don't really have those choices. If you go to the if you lose the IT person or the marketing person, and you go and they were using something, I mean, the password reset process, it might even be going to their personal email account. So you're really just totally locked out of your stuff.
Right. And so, yeah, that is a critical thing. And I'm just sharing another screen here. So this is, so I talked a little bit about IT Glue. We talked a little bit about My Glue. So this would be the kind of the IT Glue side of the house. And Kurt, I know we have you on the line here as well. So this is what we're using to document our systems. This is, again, just the demo that I have set up. But you mentioned licensing. So, you know, I have, you'll have additional tabs from an IT perspective where we're documenting things like licensing and the license keys associated with that. You know, we're documenting, you know, things like the you know, internet service provider. We're documenting the backup solution. And so certainly from an IT perspective, this is a big deal. You know, we're documenting, you know, the firewalls and the, you know, maybe the IP phones and, you know, whatever it may be, we're documenting all of those things. I guess the beauty with this documentation is that it all kind of ties together. So I may have an EXSI host and I want to find the password for that host. You know, I can easily, you know, access that password with this tool and you know what I'm looking at. So from a IT perspective, I agree with what you're saying, Ian, and we're starting to do a lot more of that where we're, you know, working with, you know, larger organizations and maybe there is an IT department in place and we're helping that IT department by facilitating some of this documentation.
What's been really nice with using these tools within our team is, you know, I know over 22 years of being in business that, you know, there was a time when we didn't have tools like this and, you know, you'd get a new marketing person or something like that and they'd come to you and they say, well, I need, you know, $500 for this piece of software, or I can sort of make do with this other thing. And then you'd find out that other thing that they did as sort of a make do, it was sort of a freemium that was sort of registered under their account. And now that we've implemented these types of password management tools, they're able to sort of document all of those freemium things. It's really hard to get into those freemium things that may be doing, you know, parts of your business when you don't even have any sort of payment relationship with the company. I mean, it's all about having the password, and you know, you might even have parts of your IT department or your marketing department, you know, hosted partially overseas on some free tool that you don't even have a credit card relationship with. And it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, and you can, as you mentioned, you know, if you don't have things properly documented, you can spend hours, you know, making phone calls to places and, you know, trying to track down the documentation, you know, digging through, you know, maybe somebody that's no longer there, digging through their email or something, trying to find, you know, documentation about a system. So this just really helps kind of simplify it and streamline it. Every tab you see here, we're able to give from the IT Glue side of the system, we can give access to My Glue as well. So let me pull My Glue back up here. So, you know, all the passwords that I have in here, most of those just came over from what I had documented in IT Glue, and so I shared that out.
The screen that you have open right now is separate from My Glue.
Yeah, technician screen. And the other one's the end user screen.
Okay.
Correct. So there's two different screens that you're looking at.
Yeah, because it got massively complicated for the non-technical over here. And I was like, oh.
Okay. Sorry about that. You guys are seeing the My Glue screen now, correct?
No.
Nope.
One other thing that we've seen on an HR policy standpoint, and you kind of touched on it earlier with that Gmail account with the university, is, you know, I guess there were some concepts around, you know, like in the past, you'd hear about somebody who creates a new invention while they're working for a big company. Let's say they're working for GE, and they create some, you know, invention sort of while working for that company, and that company sort of makes claim over that invention because they had an HR policy that said any, intellectual property created while working for that company is sort of the property of the company. But most of our HR policy manuals don't really have that type of granular request of our employees. So it really puts things like these passwords in a gray area where, if an employee does use some free services online, or they use their own personal accounts to then set up important services for the business, it's not really clear whether that's whether the employee can just sort of walk out with that, or whether that is owned by the business. So that would be something that we've seen and business be unprepared for, and then they might have to, maybe not the $200,000 sort of ransom, but we've seen a lot of businesses sort of be flat-footed in those situations and have to retain a former employee as a consultant to really get all of those things out of them, because they really didn't have it clearly defined who was responsible, or sort of where that intellectual property, who owned it.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So, and I think that really comes down to, again, if we're training our users to use a tool like this, and all systems and passwords are going into a tool like this, maybe I delete it out, but there is, a path for retrieval in a system like this if an employee goes rogue and deletes it. So I guess the other piece to this is that you can share things with other people on your team. You can keep it exclusively to you. You can share stuff with us in the IT department if you think it's pertinent to us. But really, this is your tool as an organization, and we really don't have access to it directly. We can, so you're going to have an admin on your team that's kind of overseeing this, and they're going to have the ability to add people, users, those kinds of things for this particular system. Or if there are things that you feel like we need to have access to that are pertinent to us, you can do that. But it is a separate system, so you can't have an element of security there where we're not actually accessing things.
So I guess this is another really helpful thing, because it gives you that centralized list of passwords. Just thinking back 15 years ago, when things weren't out in the cloud and there weren't so many of these websites that we depended on to do business, maybe that was 20 years ago, you'd have a server and it would have sort of a list of users, and you might have an accounting system on there and it would have a list of users, and you'd sort of have that centralized list of everyone who is in your system. But really that's, broken down over the years. Like we talked to a construction company with, what was it, 150 or so users, and they really had no list of who had access to, all of their systems. People were just kind of logging on using, like it was a home network. And
yep.
They didn't have any of these types of controls in place to really have any sort of central list of who's coming or going on, on a per machine basis, or, whether accounts are being shared. So this tool would kind of, like it's called IT glue, it's kind of gluing together some of these things that have become so decentralized over the past decade or so.
Yeah, and that's really critical for change management. You're not going to have effective change management if you're not really able to centrally control that. If if everybody has a different application or a different process, it's really impossible to control that. So it is really giving the ability to bring an element of control to your systems and your passwords. And this is likely probably just going to get worse as time goes on, because we're just doing more and more in the cloud. And unfortunately, every cloud solution has a different password and a different method for logging in, and somehow we've got to get to a place where we're able to document that and streamline that and really control that.
So this would be a help for businesses who also might have some mobile devices. You know, a lot of times a business might, you know, be responsible and buy an iPad or an iPhone or Android phone for an employee. Maybe they've got that key salesperson, but then if they just put that on the employee's desk and the employee sets up their iCloud account sort of on their own, nothing's documented, you might even be in a situation where you've got $1,000 phone that you can't even get into because that iCloud account wasn't really set up in the business's name.
Correct. Yep. That's a big deal. We've certainly worked with numerous organizations who have found themselves in that situation where, you know, an employee had an iPhone or something of that nature, and then they left. They were no longer part of the team, and everything was set up in their name. And essentially, the phone was bricked because while you could reset it the way, you know, Apple has things configured, it's not usable.
So Thomas, I have a question that brings up a good point. So I have a daughter who has this iPad who has forgotten her password. Are you able to use this, like kind of set up a home or non-related, since like each person would have their own login, so I could maybe add some things that are more like not related to work, or is that possible as well? Like kind of, hey, here's some home things that are on the side here.
So you certainly could put that in here. What you need to recognize, though, is that the IT team, if you were to leave, they are going to be able to reset your account and get in and see whatever passwords you had in place. So this is not really a tool designed for personal use.
Okay. All right. That's good to clarify. Thank you.
Well, Thomas, this has been great. Appreciate you putting it together.
Thomas, can I ask a question?
Sure.
In the last pass, you had the option to have a business section and a personal section. Could you not do somehow the same thing if you had a different type of MyGlue account?
So you may be able to do something like that. Again, this is really designed to help somebody on your team centrally manage all your company credentials.
All right.
So you could, I mean, I guess, well, let's just talk through that a little bit. So let's say you have LastPass set up and you're no longer going to be part of the company. And so are you willing then to give me your LastPass password so that I can, you know, make sure everything's documented? Or is that going to give me access to your personal stuff?
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Okay. Any other questions?
You did good, Thomas. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for jumping on here with us today. We appreciate everybody that participated, and this webinar will be available over a video later, I believe. Ian, is that correct? We'll be sending that out, and that can be shared with other folks.
So.
And we'll send out a copy of the template for the password policy. And then we have a number of short videos that go into a little bit more detail of what MyGlue looks like. And then I guess for our existing customers, if you're interested in this, talk with your account manager, and we'll set up some next steps to kind of evaluate what that would look like for your organization. If you're not an existing customer that's working with us on a contractual basis, we'd be happy to talk to you as well and see how this could work in your organization as well.
It's all part of our turnkey IT department.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.